Welcome back to the Catch Some Soulshine podcast. I'm your host, Renee Bova, and I am joined today by Julie Hest, and she is from across the pond. Isn't it crazy how we can meet people on social media from different countries and just feel like we've known each other? Anyway,
Yes.
anyway,
Yeah, I
before we
really
get
love it.
I know. Before we get started, I do always want to ask you to please like and subscribe to the channel. Share it with your friends if you think somebody would benefit from this message. And give me a comment so that I know what kind of content that you want to hear. And if you like something, I'd love to hear about it. So, Julie started a podcast called Unabridged You.
You.
Although it's similar in some ways to what we talk about here, it's different. So, we're going to talk about that a little bit today. This whole premise is awakening brilliance after life's darkest moments, but I've talked to Julie a little bit and I happened to realize that hers was like a slow building of things that led her, and I'm going to let you share that story because it was so powerful.
Hearing about your story and the darkest moments, I realized that my story wasn't particularly impactful moments, but rather the idea of if you put a frog in boiling water, it's going to jump out. But if you put a frog in nice warm water and slowly turn up the boil, the frog is gonna boil. And I've been that boiling frog. And thinking about it, it's happened on and off through my journey. And I think in the beginning, it started with growing up feeling like I needed to be happier than average, and then recognizing that if I got too average, it felt like I was really below average, and it became quite manic. Later on in life, I did a PhD, and I ended up with burnout at the end of that PhD. And it was that boiling frog situation where I felt like I was doing things in life, not only the PhD, but life, with all the shoulds that you should be doing. You should be finding a partner. You should be able to afford a house. You should be having children. You should do a PhD to show that you can, because everybody's always told you that you're capable. You should. And then I boiled.
Mm-hmm. I love that analogy because it's so true. I refer to that as ankle biters, right? Like with me, when I had the big catastrophic moments in my life, these huge losses, it stops you in your tracks. I mean, there's no getting around it. For example, yesterday, I was just in that cycle of grief or despair. And it really, when I think about it, it wasn't really the whole grief thing. It was all these little ankle biters that I have going on in my life right now. There's a lot of different little nuances and things that are happening that are way beyond my control. I can't control it. I have nothing to do with it, but in a way it impacts me. And when you pile all of those on, it's really similar to the boiling water scenario, because all of a sudden it hits you one day and you're just in that grief or that despair. And that's where I was yesterday. Instead of trying to avoid it and, put on my happy face, I've learned to lean into the pain. And so what I mean by that is not necessarily wallow in your grief, but feel it, experience it, cry if you need to, and then move forward. And that's what I did. I tried to get out of it, I'm going to be honest, but I couldn't. So I just decided this is how I'm going to feel today. And today when I got up, it was a new day, and I made a plan to use some of the tools that I've had, journaling, listening to podcasts in the morning, reaching out and talking to people. I try and do a little bit of art journaling here and there. And and then I also really believe in service, like, who you helping? That's something that I used to say to Brad all the time when he was struggling. We'd have these conversations and I'd say, "Who you helping today, Brad? Who you helping?" And I knew when he was at his best, when he could think of the little things that he was doing throughout. They didn't have to be big things either. Little tiny things that he was doing to help other people, and he felt great. So today I called up my mom this morning, or I texted her and I said, "Hey, you want to go to lunch today?" And then we went out grocery shopping all afternoon, and it was a great day. It was a great day. But I made that conscious decision to make a plan and do something. Like, we can think about things all we want, but it's in the action, it's in the doing that we get the results. That's what gets us in flow state.
The idea of sitting with it is something that I've needed to come to terms with myself when I've recognized I'm in this boiling water. What for me, it's stress. Previously, when depression wasn't a thing because it was invisible, so you couldn't see it, so you didn't know, and you didn't really talk about it because it was also a shameful thing, or a stigmatism was around it, or I must be doing something wrong that I feel like this. And now it's something we have Mental Health Awareness Month at the moment. It's
Mhm.
such a part of the daily reality now, but it was invisible. And I feel the same way about stress. We're learning more about it and how it affects us. And I think that for me personally, it's affected me very harshly. Or I've been boiling in it for that long that it's become my normal. And then when I get to the point where I realize that I'm burning, burning, there you go. It's probably some sort of Freudian slip there. When I realize I'm boiling, then my next thought is, fix it. How can you fix it? Fix it. And that just pushes that boiling water over the edge. And so, like you are saying, I've had to learn to go, okay, take a breath. It's okay to be here right now. That's where you are. You don't have to change it right now. Be with it, be in it. I was speaking with a person recently who was saying that a place where she was, the children who were stressing were taught to take a deep breath and have a big smile, like fake it till you make it. And at some points in life, maybe that's a good point, but
Mhm.
it's also okay to have our emotions, right? And to feel our emotions. And especially as when we are children, maybe if we learned you don't have to smile and fake it so young, maybe if we learned better to regulate ourselves at that point, we wouldn't get to the 41-year-old boiling frog Julie situations.
I went to that meditation retreat, and one of the things that we talked about was life is contrast, right?
Yeah.
You can't have joy without grief. You can't have light without darkness, fear without courage. So we do need these opposites.
Mhm.
We need them. I feel like sometimes when we recognize the opposite and feel it and experience it, that's when we have the biggest contrast to the other end of the spectrum. But
Mhm.
we cannot be happy all the time. It's impossible. We can't. So it's okay to have the sadness. The good thing that I've learned is I don't have to stay in it as long. I don't
Yes.
have to wallow in it, right? I have tools now. And one of the things that I'm an avid reader. I'm always reading something. One of the books I recently read was Atomic Habits. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but what
No.
he talks about is, in our culture, we want to lose weight, and when we want to lose it right now. And that's where all these fad diets and weight loss fast things come in. But what we could be doing is putting these tiny little atomic habits into our day. I get up, and I make my bed and I get on the floor and I do 10 sit-ups every day. No more, no less. And then maybe after that becomes just a habit, something that I do, like brushing your teeth. You don't think about going to the bathroom and brushing your teeth every day. If it becomes just a part of your routine, your daily atomic habit, what he illustrated is that you might not see any kind of a difference in a month, but over a year, if you're doing 10 sit-ups every single day, you're going to see a difference.
Yep.
That's the power of these tiny little atomic habits. Creativity is such a huge part of healing our brain. So people think, oh, I'm not an artist. I can't go out and paint this masterpiece. But if you have a little art journal that you just sketch something in, or like you were talking about your poetry practice, if you just do that a little bit every day, and you can do a lot if you want, but if you're doing a little bit every single day, it just becomes woven into the fabric of who you are, and it becomes a part of you, and it helps heal that brain and increase neuroplasticity, which is brain health. You get these new pathways. You are always going to have the pathways of trauma. Like, I can hear a song. I was just talking about this yesterday. That song, The Scientist by Coldplay. Somebody made a video of Brad after he passed away, a memorial video. Every time I hear that song, I burst into tears. So that pathway is always there. But now I have new pathways, lots of them, because I do these little tiny things all the time to help heal my brain. Breathing is one of them. My granddaughter got this paper from school, and it had like the outline of a hand, and it said, now you're going to breathe in when you trace around the thumb, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out around her hand. And I was like, that is genius. They're starting to put those things in the teaching for these kids because we need them to have these tiny atomic habits that they can use to help brain health.
Exactly. And when they learn it when they're kids, then it could vastly change the way society functions if we could make those little changes for the kids. I have a problem where I have been unwell recently. I've been in December. I ended up with atypical pneumonia and blood clots in my lung, and a lot of pain when I was breathing. It left me with zero energy. I think for about 4 months, I was running on maybe 40% of normal. And that was quite hard because we were actually in the process of moving house. And I couldn't do my normal everyday. I couldn't mum. I couldn't really be for me. I needed help, especially in the beginning, to even just get food. The house where we were living in, the living room was downstairs and the shower was upstairs where the bedrooms were, and I was sleeping on the couch for a few days because I couldn't make it up the stairs. And then when I did make it up the stairs to have a shower, I had to sit there for 10 minutes to get my breath back. I couldn't do these things for myself. And when I'm normally a very independent person, I really struggled with this and the sense of identity. Oh, who am I? What am I? I can't do what I normally do. What function do I have? What purpose do I have? Everybody has to look after me, and some spiral. But I'm slowly getting better. I would say I'm up to 60% of my normal now, and it can get higher, but I also have unreliable energy. So I still have days where I'm just on the couch. But on the days where I'm feeling better, I'm starting to exercise more, which is really good. But because I feel better, I do too much. And then on top of trying to heal what the illness was, I'm also dealing with having a sore body and feeling sorry for myself. So when you talk about these atomic habits, little bit by little bit, it really is a helpful idea for me because I have a habit of binging. And I
Mm.
guess that binging, those diets is what you're talking about in my mind. Or when I was a student, maybe there was a bit of everybody's having fun, let's not stop, I
Right.
see it translate through to my adult life. You're exactly right. When we could do a little bit, and maybe even what I said right at the beginning, that I felt I had to be happier than normal. Maybe that was binging on happiness. And then
Mhm.
when it goes away, you're really left with this deficit, So I really like that idea. Thank you for introducing it to me.
Yeah.
Little bit by little bit. 10 minutes walking is enough. 15 minutes next week.
I think that's something that prevented me from journaling for so long because, I used to hear people talk about, oh, they just write and write and write and journal
Mhm.
and journal and journal. And then I just started looking at it as I'm just going to write a little bit,
Yeah.
just a little bit today. Over time, I filled up a whole book. And now I'm on my second book of
Mhm.
journaling just by writing little bits and pieces here and there. I don't necessarily do that every day. It's been introduced as a part of my life now. Same with art. I may not draw or paint every single day. It's a part of my life that I do it regularly. It's become a habit for me. One of the things that I've learned with talking to so many people on the podcast, I had this doctor on and she was talking about the importance of doing the things, not just looking at art, which does help your brain function. It shows that it lights your brain up, and listening to music lights your brain up, and watching a play and a ballet, all those things light your brain up. When you can actually do the act of painting or do the act of writing, do the act of poetry, like you were talking about, the difference in how the brain lights up is over the top. And you don't have to be good at it. You just have to do it.
Yeah, I used to think that balance meant every single day doing X amount of this and X amount of that every single day, And I've started to learn that it doesn't. What it might look like to me is not necessarily what it looks like to you either. That's been a ginormous learning on my podcast journey, that I'm talking to all these people about their stories, and all their stories are different. They do have that common idea of becoming unabridged or authentic or whole or complete or moving in a direction of the person that they would like to be. But everybody's story, they have a different vehicle to get in that direction, And I just find it fascinating. The different things inside us. We're all human, but there's different things inside us. And that was the biggest learning that I took away from my PhD, was that we cannot separate ourselves from our experiences. Like, you
Mhm.
might introduce me to an idea, and that idea can become part of my experience. But if you're talking about creativity, and I think that creativity is terrible, which I don't, but just let's say I do, then I can't just accept that you think creativity is great. I'm hung up on the fact that, no, well, I don't think it's great. And so it's more work to get to that point. We can't approach a new thing with a complete empty blank slate, or the idea of walking a mile in somebody's shoes. I really appreciate that idea and trying to consider the way that somebody else is thinking. But the thing is, you are considering the way that somebody else is thinking. So, well, if you literally walked a mile in my shoes, they're only size, I don't know, 4. I'm not very tall. they're not very big shoes. You're just going to be hung up on how uncomfortable that is, let alone seeing how I experience the thing. If we recognize that, like what we're talking about, those conscious choices, that makes quite a big difference. If we recognize, I would like to explore creativity because I value the way that Dawn talks about it, and I think it would be something interesting for me to give a go. That's a
Mhm.
different approach to, no, it doesn't do it for me. We
Right.
make those conscious choices.
I love the fact that you talked about balance, and I love the way you talked about it. Like, people think balance is, okay, I'm going to, I do this much and I do this much of this, and then I do this and this and this. No, balance is being able to experience life as it comes and having tools to help you balance. Not every day are you going to have to go to a funeral and experience all that trauma and that grief. And maybe you don't get to do your journaling that day, or maybe you don't get to do your painting that day. Balance is being able to waddle through those things, find the time to experience that, and then come back maybe on another day and do the things that nurture your soul and bring you back to homeostasis or whatever. I've not quite thought of it that way, but that is a perfect example because, yeah, life happens.
Yeah.
And it doesn't always happen perfectly the way we think it should every single day. When we learn to experience everything that is coming at us, but realize that we have all these other things that we can do to get us back to center or homeostasis or flow state, however you want to look at it, it makes perfect sense that, yeah, we can get there. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, well, I had a person on the podcast who we were talking about life's ebbs and flows. And then we started to consider, instead of the word balance, we started to consider the seasons and nature. And I was living in New Zealand. We have many evergreen trees. All of the native trees to New Zealand are evergreen. So if they're deciduous and losing their trees, they're all introduced. And a lot of our trees are still native. It was a very big contrast for me to then go and be in Europe last autumn, where all of the trees changed color and lost their leaves. And I don't know if there was anything left with any coverage on it. It really highlighted for me, though, that idea of nature changing and the moon moving, and recognizing that, yeah, you're exactly right. Balance is not necessarily the scales, is it? It's the ebb and flow. We see it all around us, especially when we pay attention to nature.
Yeah, I love that. It's so true. So where can people find you? Just the Unabridged Podcast?
Yep, they can find me. The podcast is Unabridged You. Anywhere you listen to podcasts, you will find Unabridged You. Follow along. We have an Instagram page at unabridged_you if they'd like to follow along to see what's happening there, what the new episodes are about and things. Main places wherever you listen to podcasts.
Thank you so much for joining me. This has been a really insightful conversation.
Thank you. You've really opened my eyes to some new ideas too.
I wanted to thank you personally and invite you to download a free journal that I've created featuring some of my art. And if you'd like a free print from my Rooted in Faith collection, please go to dawnreneebove.com and I will drop links in the comments. Hit that bell if you're on YouTube and subscribe to the channel on Apple or Spotify. Leave me a rating because that really does help expand the reach. Keep catching that Soulshine. I'll see you next week.